Welcome to episode 16 of the Liz McMullen Show. My guest this evening is Kate Christie. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I discovered that you have a connection to my alma mater, Mount Holyoke College.
I do. In fact, I lived in faculty housing for a year there.
What an absolutely gorgeous place to live. You know, I find myself, in my head, having Mount Holyoke and Northampton frozen in time as I remember it when I was a student there. My partner teases me because we went back for my 10th reunion, and I took her to Northampton, and I was I'm going to show you the bookstore that I used to work at. And we're driving along Northampton, and I'm like, it's over here on the... And she's like, what? She's like, you're getting old. It doesn't exist anymore. So Beyond Words, which...
Yeah. It didn't exist anymore?
Nope, Beyond Words was closed. I was like, but it was right there. Then I'm taking for her to...
I remember Beyond Words. It was right on the main drag, right? Right on Main Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool. I liked working there. And, they had the main floor with books, and then the second floor there was a cafe and the children's section and the crystals section as well.
Right. God, yeah. It's hard to remember that. I actually worked at the Odyssey in South Hadley.
Yeah, no, I know that. So you were a soccer coach at Mount Holyoke.
So my wife was, now wife, she was the head soccer coach at Mount Holyoke for 5 years, and I want to say the assistant softball coach, and then she helped out with squash. I don't think it was an official squash connection, but she was the assistant softball and the head soccer coach.
So what years?
2000 to 2005.
To 2005? 2000?
Yeah, 2000 to 2005. And you were gone by then, right?
Yes. I graduated in 98.
Okay, we got there 2 years after you then.
So how did you meet your partner? Was it coaching?
We played soccer together in college at Smith.
Oh, my God.
I was a senior when she was a sophomore, and I was the captain. And so we weren't really close friends then, but she was good friends with my best friend, and they stayed in touch after college. And so I always kind of knew what she was up to. And then 1 year, she was the head coach at Pomona Pitzer before she went and became the coach of Mount Holyoke. And one of the years that she was at Pomona Pitzer, the Women's World Cup '99 was hosted in Southern California. And the women's national team used Pomona Pitzer soccer fields for their practice fields. And my sister was living in Southern California, is a huge soccer fan, like the rest of our family. And she told me, oh, they're practicing locally at Pomona Pitzer. And I said, dude, that's a friend of mine, the head coach. You should call her. And so we ended up getting in touch. I called Chris. I found her, online, found the phone number, and called her up and said, hey, my sister wants to come. And she was like, oh, my God, it's great to hear from you. And so we got back in touch that way. And I was going to take a leave of absence from my Seattle job. And Chris said, hey, I need an assistant next season. And I said, great, I want to take some time off and do some writing. And she said, well, why don't you come down to Southern California and be my assistant? And I said, great, that would be awesome. So we made all these plans just as friends. In fact, one of my friends was like, you're totally going to hook up with that soccer coach. And I was like, yeah, right. And Chris was thinking the same thing, like, yeah, right, like we'd never hook up. And then I got a call from her in May of that year, and she said, hey, so I just took the Mount Holyoke job. Do you want to come to New England instead? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I thought about it and made the decision that would change my life forever and decided to go. And while I was in Western Mass with her, two things happened. We fell in love, and my software company in Seattle laid off like 50 people, including anyone who was taking a temporary leave of absence. So I got laid off.
Sweet. Oh my God.
So I stayed, and we were there for 5 years. We got married, bought a house, started to think about kids, all that stuff. Got 2 dogs, and then we moved back to Washington State so that I could do graduate school.
What are you studying?
I got my master's in creative writing at Western Washington University.
Cool. Do you teach?
I taught as part of that. So I got a free master's degree in exchange for teaching the freshman composition, which every freshman in college hates, English 101. And since then, I've taught some instructional technology for I worked for the College of Education at the university, and then now I do marketing and communications. So I'm not doing any teaching at all, but that's okay. Teaching English 101 is not really anything anyone wants to teach, which is why they give it to graduate students who have never taught before.
Oh my God. I remember at Mount Holyoke, I had to take English 101 for 2 semesters, and I hated it, which was so weird because things that I loved in high school were my English classes and my history classes. And I took a history class at Mount Holyoke. Was not happy either. I was like, how could I not love this? And then I studied political science, mostly political theory, and I fell in love with one professor, not literally. I liked her style. I wasn't into her. But she was just so intellectually stimulating and wonderful, and she started this new major called critical social thought, which I probably would have majored in if it hadn't come up on the scene when I was a senior. But I really loved that, and I studied myth and religion. And I went to Trinity in Dublin to study there. This was a squirreling. When you go to study abroad, you have to justify as to why you have to study abroad rather than continuing your studies at Mount Holyoke at the time. And so I was like, oh, Mount Holyoke doesn't really have a whole lot of classes on this, so I'm going to have to go to Ireland for a year, which was great.
Darn.
Nuts! It was terrible. And speaking of, it kind of dovetails into Family Jewels in that I did a lot of traveling to Amsterdam.
Oh, nice.
Because it was cheap. It was like a good little puddle jumper. I went to Amsterdam a lot. I went to Paris a lot. So it was kind of cool seeing your character go around Europe. I was like, I did that a lot, and I loved it.
Yeah, for like 5-day Belgium, Amsterdam tour, which is what I did with a friend in, 2002 or something. Mm-hmm. So it's not, it's not a ton of time to get acquainted with the place. So you're probably much better acquainted with it after spending multiple jaunts. Yeah,
for me, because I had so much opportunity to do that, I did 6 weeks backpacking after I finished Trinity.
Okay.
And the way I describe it, it's like taking a survey of Europe where you get to spend a little bit of time in every place. But in that way, it's like you find out where you want to revisit. And I did this thing, it's called a Ural Pass, where, have you done that before?
Yeah, well, I lived in England after college. I worked in a pub and in a bagel shop, and my most interesting part-time job ever, I sold teddy bears door to door in London for a day. It was one of those college graduates, come apply, and we'll do an introductory seminar. And the whole seminar, I'm sitting there with 14 other people, and we're looking at each other going, what are they teaching us? I don't even understand what this is. We're all recent college graduates and really naive. And then they took us out and they put us on the tube with an experienced, I forget the word they used, but a representative, I think it was, customer representative. And he was the person teaching us how to sell stuffed animals door to door. And the moment where one of the other disciples and I quit was when he stopped at a church and there was a priest. And I'm no fan of the Catholic religion, being queer, but the sales guy started yelling at the priest when he didn't want to buy a teddy bear. And this other guy and I looked at each other and were like, dude, I'm so out of here. And we went away and got on the tube and went home. And that's why I ended up working at the bagel shop instead, because at least we weren't yelling at priests. So
that is unique. I've never gone there. I've been a barista, though that term did not exist at the time.
Yeah. Coffee server?
Yes. I don't know. It was this place in Hoboken called Park Pastries. Okay. And the coffee was good, but the pastries were fantastic. fantastic. I'm amazed that I didn't gain like 20 pounds like working there, but it was just so delicious and wonderful.
That would be dangerous.
Yes, very dangerous. But as I was saying, the Dutch people are really darn cool. Going back to like family jewels, I'll let you do a little intro about the book. But what I remember was how they were just so kind. Like I was dating somebody from there, and they were so kind and welcoming and sweet, and took me, around to this place called the Efteling, which is their version of Disneyland, but not as commercial. It's like Grimm's fairy tales kind of thing. And that was really groovy because they don't romanticize things in Europe. It's actually the way, even the scarier, like the scarier stories and whatnot, and they're not trying to sell you everything at every corner. So that was really groovy too.
Because if you think about Hansel and Gretel, that's really scary. It's really scary.
It is twisted and scary and awful, but
and dark.
Dark, yes. So definitely not. You wonder that those stories and nursery rhymes, like what are we singing to children?
Yeah, no, I was. One of the things that I like to do is we have about 15 acres. I'm pointing because I can see it. 15 acres of woods right outside our front door, and it's a green belt. We live in a development, but there's this whole old growth forest. Western Washington has, cedars and fir trees, and so they're like 75 to 100 feet tall. And I love to take my daughter for walks out there. She's 2, and when she was a very small baby, I would take her in the front pack. And I wanted to start like a song for her. And so I thought of 3 Blind Mice, and I started to kind of sing that because it's just one of those easy things that comes to mind. And I realized, wow, cut off the tail of the carving knife? Like, this is creepy.
Rockabye baby, I rocked you, you fell the hell out of the tree.
Right? It's weird.
That's awful. That's terrible.
So I end up changing a lot of the words, which is, maybe I'm coddling her, but so be it. She doesn't
I'm doing the remix.
Nuts.
It's fine. It's fine. So how did you end up at Smith? How did you hear about it?
I was eager to get away from my high school. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is a lovely place to grow up and a great place to be. But, as a queer teenager, I was aware that I didn't fit in and struggled with some depression with that. And so I was really looking at college as the way to get out and get away from that kind of environment where I felt almost suffocated. Mm-hmm. And so I did really well in school on purpose so that I could get some scholarships. I come from a teaching family, so not a whole lot of money. And I knew that if I was going to go away, it was going to have to be on scholarship. And so I did well and was sent all these catalogs from different colleges and was recruited. And one of the schools that recruited me, and I do note the irony in that, was Smith. And I remember I was sitting on my bed looking through catalogs one day, and I pulled out the Smith catalog. And I read through it, and it was cool, and they profiled a soccer player. And I was like, well, that's slick, because I wanted a school. I knew that I wanted to play Division III soccer. Back in that day, there weren't very many Division I programs. You had to be kind of the cream of the crop, and I knew I was a good soccer player, but not necessarily Division I star material. I could maybe walk on at Michigan State, which was a good program, but I didn't really want to go to Michigan State because it had 40,000 people. But then I got this, brochure from this small women's college in New England. And I knew nothing about New England. I knew nothing about the Seven Sisters. Totally ignorant of that. And they profiled a soccer player. I thought that was cool. And then I turned to the back page of the catalog on the very back cover. And there was this picture. And it was 2 women walking down, it turns out that it's Ainsworth Gymnasium, is the big new gymnasium, but next to it is the little Scott Gymnasium, and that's the old one built, 100 years ago or something, whatever, 75 years ago. And it was so, quintessential ivy-covered brick little building, and there were fall, autumn leaves, beautiful New England leaves, swirling in the breeze around these two women, and they were looking over their shoulder at the camera and smiling, and each of them had a bag on their shoulder that said Smith College Athletics. And I said to my parents, I'm going there. And that was it. And they told me later, they were like, sure you are, honey. Yeah, right, we're not going to be able to pay for that. So, because I worked pretty hard in high school to be able to get to get scholarships and things, I was lucky that I was accepted, and Smith has a great endowment, and they offered me all sorts of financial aid. So I was actually, my parents were shocked. I had a full ride to 2 colleges in Michigan, and it turned out it was tuition paid at these 2 schools, and it turned out that Smith's financial aid package was actually better than that because it helped pay for room and board. So it was going to cost less for me to go away to Smith than it would have to go to Michigan State for free. So I would have had to, pay room and board there. So that made the decision, and I was very excited.
Yeah, I was introduced to Smith, actually women's colleges in general. My across the street neighbor was a Smithy.
Really?
Yes.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Hoboken, which is in Jersey, across from Manhattan.
Yes.
And she was really groovy. She was in her 20s when she moved across from where I live. And she used to invite me over her house for tea.
Oh, that's so funny.
Formal, like really cool, like,
Friday afternoon?
Really, yes, it was really cool formal tea. And, she even, the first time that she had me over, she even had those cute little sandwiches and whatnot. And she's not like your wearing pearls type or anything like that. It wasn't like that, but, it was just something. And I really thought she was awesome, and she was so smart. And, everything that she told me about Smith, I was like, I want to go to Smith, definitely.
Yeah.
So I did apply to Smith. What I ended up doing, I realized I liked the concept of going to a women's college. I didn't realize I was queer at the time. But my father was joking because, like, in this movie called Stripes from the 70s.
Oh, I remember Stripes.
You remember Stripes? And, like, they're doing the interview, and they're like, are you gay? No, but we're willing to learn. So my father always was joking about that, and unfortunately it bit him in the ass because I realized I like girls when I was about 19, and I've been dating girls ever since. So I did learn how to be a queer at Mount Holyoke College. But this is what happened. I went to school, Catholic school in Jersey City, and...
You didn't know you liked girls?
Nope, not even a freaking clue. And the thing is, like, I've always been, raised by hippies, so, we're always really not sex positive, but, just like really open and flower child, wild girl. And I was like, if I haven't had a crush, I went to an all-girl Catholic school. I said, if I didn't have a crush when I went to an all-girl Catholic school, and my first year at Mount Holyoke, I didn't have any interest in women, I was like, I must not be,
Yeah.
But I was wrong. So when I realized I like women's colleges, I went to all of them on the East Coast during, my father was taking me around. I went to like Bryn Mawr and Wellesley and Smith and Mount Holyoke, and I went to Smith and I realized that I didn't like the way that the campus was broken up, and it was kind of, a part of a city, because I went to school in Jersey City, and like, sometimes the bus stops that I had to wait at, there were a drug dealer here, or like, just really ugly urban, ugh. So I was like, I want to go someplace pretty.
Beautiful. And, the Mount Holyoke campus is much more attractive than the Smith campus.
Yes.
Because it's more of a uniform sort of architecture.
It's got that going on. It also is a self-contained campus, and it was just so beautiful and bucolic. And I just had that feeling, when you go to a place and you're like, this is where I belong.
Yeah, that's when I visited Smith after I'd been accepted. I hadn't visited it yet, and I went to visit, and it was like a beautiful April weekend, like 60 to 70 degrees out, and I sat on a bench in Northampton, and I thought, this is where I belong.
This is it. This is it. I love being a part of the 5 college system. I loved visiting Northampton. I'm glad I went to Mount Holyoke because it was a good fit for me. But I used to go clubbing by Smith. I can't remember the name of the bar, but there was a gay bar.
Gosh, I was just telling someone about it the other day. Now I'm blanking on the name. I'll think of it.
Yeah. So I used to go there when I was just
right next to campus.
Right next to campus.
Street.
Yes.
I loved that place.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I loved going there because, they let you go in when you're 18 and up. And, it definitely... Yes. So
every Friday night, yeah.
I had the weirdest experience. This is just like a last footnote on sexual orientation. My first year at Mount Holyoke, because everybody was always asking me about like the lesbians and whatnot, and how are you going to find a good husband going to a girls' school? I was, girls' school.
Of course, that's why we all go to college.
Yes, we're looking for people to screw. No, I remember when I went, I said, well, there are the lesbians, but they don't bother anybody. They keep to themselves, right? So the next year, all my friends were queer. I was taking women's studies courses on top of that, just for good measure. And I remember saying, the heterosexuals, they keep to themselves. They don't bother anybody.
Which at Smith wasn't true. They bothered us quite a bit.
Oh, Lord.
There's that old legacy, old money pearls crowd that it didn't feel like Mount Holyoke really had. Mount Holyoke seemed a lot mellower in some ways. There's that kind of conservative contingent still at Smith. I suspect that it's still there based on what's going on right now. There's an issue about a trans student.
Yes.
M to F, Calliope Wong, who's trying to get in, and it's a big to-do right now. So, there's always that kind of debate at Smith between the legacy pearls quad people versus the people who live in Central Campus, which is the very queer identified section of campus. And the thing about the quad is that not only is it anti-gay, or used to be, I don't know how it is now, I'm talking about early 90s, there was definitely an anti-gay feel to different houses that I would go to, including my senior year girlfriend lived in Comstock, where my best friend from Stalker lived, and there was definitely a contingent of folks who were a little bit on edge about my presence because, of course, I had the short hair and I was completely out. I think that not only was it anti-gay, but it was also, there was a racist component there. There was one house on campus that had put into their house constitution that no person of color would ever be allowed to live in that house.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Well, that's the rumor. Let me step back and say the rumor is that house had that put into, and there's nothing to actually confirm that. There's no evidence to confirm that I've ever seen. But the fact that we all believed that was possible tells you a little bit about that situation. And that was the house. I love it. That was the house. So I was in college when Bill Clinton was elected, and the first time, and it was so great because that house I'm talking about that was the most conservative on campus. I won't name the house, but one of my friends from soccer lived there, and several of her friends were made up the entire Republican club at Smith then. There were like 10 people in it. And the night that Clinton was elected, my friend Erin and I came over to visit our soccer buddy, Robin. And we come running in because we're so excited that Bill Clinton has been elected. Oh my God, we just heard it's so great. And we walk in, and in the downstairs area, common room, there was a television. And there were 9 or 10 members, pretty much the entire Republican Party club, sitting in there. And several of them had Kleenexes and were dabbing their eyes. And Aaron and I overheard one of them say to the others, he could still win. He had like 10 states at that point, and Clinton had, plenty of electoral votes to carry it and had already been declared the winner. But they were like, George Bush could still win. And we were just like, yeah, Clinton.
Holy crap. Well, you've just totally blown my mind, because I remember one of the other reasons, which I didn't think to, I thought that Smith was more militant. My impression when I was going around, and I was like, I don't think I want to be around a place this intense. And I always, the impression was, I know you probably heard this before, but the the saying that in Smith, 4 years, gay in 4 years or your money back. Have you heard that before?
That one, isn't that funny?
Yeah, gay in 4 years or your money back. And so, like, I always thought that, like, Smith was, tromping with, like, all these, really intense feminist lesbians.
Because the flip side of it was that in Central Campus, there were people who told me I wasn't gay enough because I did have friends who lived in the quad. And I had friends who were kind of closeted and weren't out and proud. And the out and proud folks were pretty judgmental of that as well. So there was a lot of judgment all around, I think. In fact, my favorite was that my senior year, someone said to one of my friends, she's not queer enough because she's friends with those people in the quad. And 5 years later in Seattle, I ran into that woman, and she was married to a man.
Oh my God, that's so true. Because there were these women who were so militant at Mount Holyoke about being queer and lesbian and like Gold Star lesbian and all. Then the next time I hear about them, they're married, and a few of them I saw when I visited for my 10th reunion, and they not only had their husbands, but they had their children in tow as well. I'd like to turn the discussion over to Beautiful Game, and about this kind of segues into that perception. Is this person queer? Is this person straight? Can they love me? Will they be able to accept me? Cam is struggling with this in A Beautiful Game. She's a soccer player. She has this feelings for a tennis player, and she's trying to feel it out. But that's not the only thing that the story is about. But, this is where she's coming from. Little does she know that Jess lives year-round in a house where her landlords are a lesbian couple. So that blew Cam's mind.
Right.
And I kind of liked it because often the plot and character arc that you experience in most romance novels, you get introduced early on as to who's this person, who's that person. They're going to be interested in each other eventually. They're going to get together. There may be, things working against them. In the end, it's like a happy story. Yes.
Right.
So,
yes. They get to the happy ending.
Exactly. But I didn't feel like the story was driven by the romantic liaison. I felt it was driven by Cam's life that year, and like learning what she was like before then, and her friendships and the tension on the team, and the experience for college students who are athletes as opposed to college students who are a part of a team, like their athleticism, like their responsibilities, their practices, their games. It's all something that only they can truly understand. Like, even though Jess was a tennis player, sports really important to her. She's like the number one seed. And so the two of them could relate on that, and they start to hang out together. And I'm like, wait, they hang out to each other a lot, and they have dinners together, and they watch sports together, and what, they still don't know that they like you? Why not? How come you don't know?
Yeah, and that was something that actually happened with me in college with someone where we spent all this time together. It was an entire season, and it was this kind of what's going on, but so much of it was sports oriented, and I think in a way, Beautiful Game was not, in my mind, a romance novel as much as it was Cam's story. And so I think I didn't understand the conventions necessarily. I mean, leaving LA, I set out to write kind of a traditional romance. And so it's in third person. It goes back and forth between the two main characters. You see both points of view. Beautiful Game is first person. You only get Cam's point of view. You only see the world through her eyes. And so that was something I was actually going through, was more the story of her experience that year and her falling in love with someone who had secrets and things that Cam, frankly, could not have expected because of her own kind of slightly idyllic background. And so Cam was a way for me to tell a couple different stories of, personal things and people I knew, and a way to fictionally treat a couple. I don't want to say to treat issues, because it's not really what it was about. It was more like, here was this character telling this story that I cared so deeply about because it was so deeply personal on multiple levels. And in both characters, the stories that they had were so deeply personal to me that I felt so compelled to write this novel. And I knew when I was writing it that I wasn't capable of writing it very well, because I was 24 at the time, maybe 23 at the time. And I remember having this conversation with my dad when I was moving home from the East Coast. I lived in New York City for a while with my girlfriend in the Village, and I was coming home so that I could move to Seattle, because I just knew New York City wasn't really my style. I wasn't a big urban person. And so I was moving home, and he and I were in the car driving from New York City to Michigan. And he said, so when are you going to start your writing career? Because since I was 10, I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And I just looked at him and I said, Dad, I'm not ready yet. And he said, why not? You have these stories you want to tell. And I said, yeah, but I don't have the life experience. I don't have any perspective yet. And yet I desperately wanted to tell this story about Cam. And so I wrote it anyway, just the first draft. And then I decided to come back to it after leaving LA, because it was a story that I loved so much, and I wanted to try to do it a little bit of justice. So I rewrote it pretty majorly, but keeping the characters and the kind of basic storyline the same.
What I find often happens with women is we have this concept of, well, in order to do like the best job and the most most productive or most successful, we need to have a certain level of skills or skill set. Like, I need to know the world. I need to have perspective. I can't enter onto this until I've really grasped it all. And a lot of times men are like, fuck it all, I'm going to do it, like jump into it.
I rock. I'm going to rock this shit. Yeah, that men have that kind of attitude of, they assume their competence.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly it.
They're raised to assume that they're competent, I think, and women are, and honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing that we kind of question our competence here and there. I think the problem is, and being a women's college graduate, I questioned my competence much less than, the average, I think, probably co-ed college graduate, if you believe studies and research and all that. But as a writer, I think it's smart to question everything when you're young, because writing takes a lifetime of reading and a lifetime of writing to really get good at. I mean, I'm 41 and I only feel like I'm starting to come into my own now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, perspective changes over time. It's just when you had mentioned that, I was like, I too, at points in my life, I'm like, I don't know if I could do this particular job because, like, I don't have... Exactly. And when it comes to writing, the craft is one of the few things that has that level of evolution. There is no finish line. There's always going to be something that you can learn. And you do so by reading books and working on your voice and editing and finding your place and constantly setting new goals for yourself. There is no finish line. It requires a lifetime of learning, devotion, and, lots of hard work. Tell me a little bit about your process, what books that you approached first, what you spent time on.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I wrote, I wrote Beautiful Game, then I wrote Flight, which is the one I'm working on revising right now, then I wrote Solstice, then I wrote Leaving LA, and then I wrote Patron Saints, which I'm going to come back to eventually. Mm-hmm. So I have this Leaving LA is the only book that I've written and then sent off to the publisher right away. And that's, again, I think it was easier to do that because I was setting out to write a traditional contemporary romantic novel after learning that Solstice was going to be marketed as that. I was just writing a novel when I wrote Solstice, and I sent it in to Bella Books, and Karen Colmaker did something that I don't think she does a whole lot of, which was to write me back and say, we really like this novel, but it doesn't fit our genre. It doesn't fit a genre. So first of all, well, the first draft was set in present tense, and it was about 110,000 words. And the typical romance novel is around 80,000. And not only was it 110,000 words, but it had like 5 viewpoint characters, including the ghost of someone's dead brother, Sam's dead brother, who features prominently in the story. I had him as a viewpoint character. And I had Sam's mother as a viewpoint character as well. And so one of the things that ended up happening was me learning kind of the realities of publishing, which is when you're writing a novel, typically if you want to get published, it's helpful to have an audience in mind. And I was sending it off to Bella saying, hey, this is a romance. And they were coming back and saying, well, yeah, but, you know, it's not a traditional one. And then the other thing was that there was some extracurriculars involved that I won't go into, but didn't necessarily need to be included. So I took it back after Karen sent me this really great, positive, really encouraging email saying, we'd like it, but, you know, if you can work on these things and send it back to us, then great. And so I revised it and sent it back, and then it was accepted for publication. So Solstice was accepted 10 years after I wrote the first draft.
Wow.
Yeah, and part of that was that I sent it out when I first wrote it a couple times, but I still had that feeling of, I'm not there yet. I don't want this to be my first novel. Like, I'm not happy enough with it. And I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school because as an undergraduate, I was a women's studies major, and that meant that I took a lot of really great classes, but I took maybe one 200 level English class. And so my big English classes were in high school. And I felt that if I want to be a novelist, I need to go back and study novels and also writing, creative writing. So that's why I kind of waited till after I got my master's to feel like I had undertaken full-time 2-year study of reading novels, writing fiction, all of that. And then I felt like, okay, I kind of have my bearings now. I feel like I know what I'm doing a little bit better. I'm more confident in myself. And the thing about grad school was I was the only person in my program who was contemplating writing popular fiction.
Everybody else wanted to be a literary fiction?
Yes. And when I would read any of my stuff in class, I had one classmate who didn't have literary aspirations, and he was like, you're so awesome, like, I could pick this up, like, down at the, you know, in a magazine and read it, it's so cool. And then my best friend from grad school was like, well, you know, you write popular fiction, so, you know. And that was supposed to be an insult.
It's like, here's a dose of intellectual snobbery.
Yeah, it was. And the funny thing is that probably because I went to Smith, that made me pissed off. And so as soon as I finished, I was like, screw you people, I'm publishing all my books.
There's so many people who produce dreck, like completely like boring shit, literary fiction. And, you know, they think that they're all, you know, we have to, you know, immerse ourselves in the prose and
the language. That was an ongoing debate in my program, and I was the lone person going, guys, it's not just language, it's also story, it's character, it's development, it's plot. I'm sorry, there's something called a plot, and people are like, oh!
No, there's a good point because, yes, you may write things that are interesting to the choir, that you doth preach to, but if you don't have a good plot, if you don't have characters that are interesting to take the plot along its little trip, people are going to put your book down.
Right.
And
that's to do. I mean, there are some great literary writers out there who do that. I think there are more people who are like me who can write a good, decent story that people will want to read with characters that they can identify with. I think that's more common.
There has, no matter what you're reading, there has to be strong characters. There needs to be momentum. I need to care. I need to care what's going to happen next. I need to care about the characters. And my college background was political philosophy. So we're, lots of ivory tower people pontificating and, talking about the meaning of life.
Right.
But
and how government impacts that.
Exactly. So, honestly, I can read a lot of different things. I like reading genre fiction because I'll admit it, I like lesbian land, and even though that's not reality, I like lesbian land.
With you.
So what I finally remembered what I wanted to talk to you, what I wanted to mention, which is the convention of writing a romance novel, the focus, and oftentimes what you'll do, like I said, there'll be the seed that's planted, and you're like, oh, the seed that's planted is early on in your book actually does exist, where this just person is usually not very easy to get to know. She's not very personable. Everybody thinks she's cold or whatnot. But she's noticed me, and she gave me a ride, and, I saw her at one point here. So it's like this little seed's planted. But the story is not, well, just love me. The story is Cam and her life and her getting to know, like she's getting to know Jess. We're getting to know also her friends as well. We're getting to know Holly and her girlfriend who has problems with ritualized male violence, a.k.a. football, does not want to go to... And the thing is, like, I remember Mount Holyoke, and it's like, I know these women. I know these women who have, like, this, moral high ground stand. I simply do not want to be a part of that patriarchal system. It's just wrong. But some things are just fun. And, I hated sports to watch. I liked sports to be an athlete. Like, I was an athlete in high school. I was a swimmer. As captain of my team. I played rugby at Mount Holyoke for a little bit. And
I remember you saying you played rugby at Mount Holyoke. Yeah. And that's an intense sport.
Oh my God. For how sports goes, like in football, you have, pads. And you have this thing called, let's stop and reset. No. Yeah. Rugby is continuous play. It's going and going and going. There's no stop. If you don't have endurance, you're fucked. Yeah. It's a very serious sport.
I played it for a month my senior year after soccer was done. And then we were getting ready to start the season, and then I blew my knee playing indoor soccer in a tournament. And so I didn't actually get to, actually play on the rugby team, but I had practiced, and I was all ready. I was one of those little backs, because I was quick.
Yes.
And I never wanted to be touched, but I'm sure I would have done.
Well, if you're like a squirrely fast person, you won't get touched as much. Like, I was not a fast person, and I joke with people that I have really awful hand-eye coordination. That's why I was not going to be on the softball team or on soccer or anything that, involved. But for rugby, there are two types of players. There are you fast little fuckers who, get all the tries because you can run your little asses off.
And then we're so scared of being tackled by the massive bulldozer. We're like,
And then there are people like me who's in the scrum, and it's because I have endurance and I'm a brute. So,
you can move the scrum single-handedly.
So I was an 8-man, which means that I had to control the back of the scrum and whatnot, which means you have 7 women that you're keeping forward momentum, and if something tips to the left, you have to move it with your shoulders to the right. It was awesome. It was power. Because if you're tall, you're either a second or you're an 8. And the thing about seconds is that they're getting their balance from the props in front of them. Like anybody who knows rugby, you're kind of interlocked physically. And then there's the 8-man who's holding the 2 seconds together and has control. It's like, I don't want to trust my life to somebody behind me and somebody in front of me. It's like a control issue.
I was just going to say that.
Just a little bit. But I love tackling. I love tackle practice. Like, if you're having a fuck-off awful day, you go to tackle practice, you can beat the crap out of each other for an hour, and yay, I feel so much better.
That's how slide tackle practice is in soccer.
Yeah.
We would wait until there was a rainy day, and then when I was the assistant coach at Mount Holyoke, I would teach slide tackles. We wait for a rainy day, so that's a lot safer because you can slide a lot more easily. And then we would slide tackle the crap out of each other. It was awesome. It was great fun.
Oh, yes. Good fun was had by all. Well, rugby is a drinking team with a rugby problem.
Drinking out of the shoe? Out of the boot?
Yeah, shoot the boot. If you have one. Yeah. Shooting the boot means that you have to drink a beer out of the shoe you have been playing in.
Oh, it's so nasty.
That's the way it goes. And it's the funniest thing because, we had drinking practice on Fridays where we'd learn the songs and whatnot. And drink, of course. And the thing is, in rugby, if you choose to sing a verse, you have to sing it correctly. If you don't sing it correctly, then you have to chug whatever's left in your beer can, and then you have to try again. And if you fuck up again, you have to drink the entire... So, of course, like, the likelihood...
Yeah, exactly.
The likelihood of you getting right diminishes. And like when you're chugging, they're like, why are we waiting? We could be masturbating. Why are we waiting for you to drink? It was awesome. And the thing that I loved about rugby that you don't get in most sports is when you go to a game, you're beating the crap out of each other for like 2 40-minute halves, right? And then afterwards, you drink beer together and sing dirty songs and, have camaraderie.
Together, exactly.
Exactly. I thought that was beautiful. It's like, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. I'm going to knock you down. I'm going to strip balls out of your hands. I'm going to steamroll you. And then we'll drink together.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's sport. You know what I mean? Like, that's that idea of... on the field, you do everything, you leave it there, and then you come together and you realize that we have a lot in common.
Absolutely, and it's
fun. We're in common with each other.
It's fun, and you get this you get this understanding, this perspective, because a lot of times, and when I was in high school, you're on your team, and they're on that other team, and we're going to beat that team, and we have opinions about that team, and we're going to but with rugby, it's like, all right. Yeah, all right, you sing the next verse, man, go for it. And you're so sore, and you're covered with bruises, and you're filthy and sweaty, but you're drinking and singing body songs, so.
Exactly. Okay, sorry, my dog is trying to climb into my lap.
Hello, doggy. Yes, my first interview had an awesome dog in it, Merlin. Yeah. And when I got to, because like I gave birth to the idea of the Looks of McMullen show during Hurricane Sandy.
Okay.
So my partner and I were actually living in our house in one of the hardest hit cities in the Jersey Shore. And while I was there, bored to tears, because like after the storm, we're stranded. And so we have all this time. And I was like, I want to do, I'm going to do a show about not about storms in general. It wasn't going to be a weather show, but I've been interviewing authors at the cocktail hour, and then I was like, I want to talk to some authors who've lived through this. And so I planned that, but my internet access and whatnot was not really working even after the storm. So I actually went to Nell and Trinity's house, and their dog Merlin is a very enthusiastic English bulldog.
Oh, I love English bulldogs. They're such great dogs.
And he was wonderful, but he also wanted to be in on the action, and he was like jumping all over the place. So eventually, they gave him a bone. Mm-hmm. So if you listen closely to the episode, you can hear him chomping away.
So he'd be distracted.
Yes. He was in on the game. He was a part of the recording. He was there, and I was like, "Well, you were there during the storm. It's your story too, Merlin."
Yeah. Now, did they have a baby or a little kid or something?
Yeah, they do. They have a son.
Right.
Yes, who is awesome and smart and sweet and cool. But he wasn't there. It was just the three of us.
Just the dog.
Just the dog was there. Yes. So that was cool. And then from that point forward, the people that I was interviewing, I was talking to them about their work. And then I did a story with Ali Valley and Gene Redman. And we did an episode, Katrina versus Superstorm Sandy. So that's out there, too. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw that on the YouTube playlist. I saw that one was out there.
Yeah, it was great. And they're two wonderful storytellers. And both of them have lived in New Orleans for a very long time. And so I got to see, what their experience was, which was, pretty much the first, the interview went on really long. So the first episode was about that, and the second one was about post-recovery and what is it like to write a series in New Orleans after Katrina.
In Orleans.
Yeah, right. So that was really neat. So pulling it back to your stuff, because it's really fun to talk about other things too. But
it is, isn't it? Especially with a women's college graduate.
I know, it's like
when you get out in the world, all the distinctions between Smith and Mount Holyoke, well, maybe not Wellesley, but
not well. No, actually, I went to Wellesley's campus, and as a part of my visiting campuses things, and I had this really awful feeling when I seriously, it was almost metaphysical. I went on the campus and I was going to go get a guide, one of their, an application and whatnot. And I remember stepping out and I was like, this is not the place that I want to be in. And it sounds so weird because it's arbitrary, but in the sameness of Mount Holyoke where I was on campus, I'm like, this is it. And I was on Wellesley campus and I was like, this is not it.
Well, I can't remember if I put this in Beautiful Game or not. Is there an incident where someone calls Cam a dyke on the field?
Yes.
Okay, that's based on Wellesley College.
Really?
My junior year, we went to play Wellesley, and there was a freshman forward on their team. I was a defender, so she was a striker, and I was marking her. And the way the game shook out, I was like marking her really tightly. And she was one of those 5'10", beautiful brunette, long hair. Totally went to some prep school on the East Coast. Probably had pearls at home. And at one point, and I was short, and I had short, dark hair, and I was a feisty little defender. And she could not get past me. She wasn't the greatest soccer player in history, and so she was pretty easy to shut down as a defender. And at one point, she pushed me off her and said, "Get away from me, you fucking dyke."
Nice.
And I just looked at her. I was like, here we are at Wellesley College, and I'm a Smith College soccer player, and there are at least 3 clearly identifiable lesbians on your team who are wearing the same soccer lesbian uniform that I'm wearing with the short hair and, all that. And I was like, serious? And I didn't say a word. I just walked away. And after the game, she came up to me. You walk through and you shake hands.
Yeah.
And did I put that in Beautiful Game where, I totally ignored this woman? She held out her hand and I walked away. And she followed me and said, hey, number 8. And I turned and I looked at her and she said, "I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that." And I didn't say a word and I just walked away. Because I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Where do you go?
It's like, she's probably got some internalized homophobia going on there.
Probably. She was a freshman, and you never know what happens with people. But it was one of the most eye-opening moments because I played at lots of different schools. We played at Brandeis, we played at Babson, we played at all these different co-ed schools where the guys would line aside and shout, "Dyke, dyke, dyke" at us, and who cares? But to have a fellow women's college soccer player say that to me, that's the one and only time that's ever happened, and I was not happy about it, and it just made me think, Wellesley, you suck. And I know that's not fair. It's totally not fair at all.
And because a lot of times your opinion in a place can be shaped by those kinds of experiences.
A single incident, and I know that's not fair because one of the fellow senior year, I played against Wellesley, and there was a woman on the team who I was actually really friendly with, and we knew someone in common, and we hung out, and she was great. So it's not fair to ascribe, that kind of thing to all of Wellesley campus. But it's difficult for me to think of Wellesley without thinking of the moment when someone called me a fucking dyke on their campus
during a game, and the thing that's weird is, not weird, but what I experienced as different at Mount Holyoke with rugby and being in a women's college is that we played a gentleman's game. Now, yes, we're knocking your ass down, we're going to tackle you, but it's going to be a clean tackle, okay?
Yeah.
And we're going to behave in a way that's appropriate. We're not going to be, we're not going to break
an understood code of conduct.
Exactly. And I actually dated a male rugby player, and their shit is completely different. They do a lot of dirty games, they do a lot of, inappropriate things, and even on a professional level, because when I was in Ireland, I was watching the French Irish game. Mm-hmm. And the French guy, like, first of all, like, one of them ran, punched somebody, and moved. But because the ref didn't see it, it didn't happen. Or, like, they're throwing things in the scrum, but they're throwing it off closer to where their team is instead of down the center where they're supposed to play. And the only time that we had an experience that was, you know, dodgy was against Springfield College.
Oh, Springfield, yeah.
which we referred to as the gym teachers college, and they were the only ones who acted the way the guys do. And they'd be like, you know, like I was running and I was like I was in the act of stripping the ball, and she's like, get the fuck away from me. I'm like, this is rugby, okay? I'm supposed to strip the ball. If you have the ball, I'm supposed to tackle you.
Right.
This is a part of the whole process.
This is not touch football.
Exactly. This is not flag, you know, whatever. And we had a hooker, which is a position, not you know, not selling her body, but, you know, it's like a little person.
Although your audience may not be.
Yes, yes. So anyway, so the Tweet was called Tweety because she looked like Tweety Bird. She had long ass blonde hair and she's little, whatever. So this person, like, you know, clipped her across, like, you know, like a clothesline, like knocked her ass down like on the person. And so, like, when nobody's looking, she like goes like, and then like runs away and got a girl good. That was a punch move because the other one was playing so dirty, and she's just like, and then like kept on going because
well, it's funny because you said with male rugby it's different, and part of that might be because it's a club, but also, I mean, women's sports seem to be really different from men's sports in that degree. And so my example is the U.S. women's national team. Mm-hmm. Anson Dorrance was their longtime coach for like 20 years in the 90s and into the 2000s. And I remember hearing an interview with him where he said to, it was either Mia Hamm or Julie Foudy, one of the top players in the 90s. And he said, when you get hit in the box, you have to go down so you can get the penalty kick. And whoever it was looked at him and said, that's not how we play. And he's like, well, it should be. And I remember thinking, no, it's not. If you get hit and knocked off the ball, then you get knocked off the ball and you don't get your scoring chance. That's the game. Like, that's legal. It's a contact sport. Mm-hmm. And his perspective, which really matched a lot of kind of the men's coaches that I'd heard, was that if you get knocked off the ball, then fake falling down so that you get the penalty kick call. And that seems to me to be kind of symbolic of the differentiation between men's and women's athletics and an approach. That women, and I'm so generalizing here, but there does seem to be a gender difference in that, in fairness, and I should probably stop talking because I'm going to get it.
In all fairness, yes, let's move our upper bodies like we're dodging left, but we're really going to dodge right, and we're going to go around that one. So, like, to go completely tangential and out of left field of whatever, you know, kind of sports reference we want to yank out for this, you do have an impending release called Flight. You do. And so, can you tell us a little bit about Flight?
Yeah, so the main character is, at the opening of the story, is 18. She's a teenage running sensation who has been injured and is no longer, when she was a sophomore and junior, she was highly sought out by colleges for the 5K is her main race. But she was injured her junior year, and then her senior year, her aunt, who raised her, gets sick with cancer. And so Ash is the main character. She is kind of stopped running at this point to kind of spend the last months with her aunt that she can, because it's metastatic pancreatic cancer, stage 4. There's no way her aunt's going to make it. So when the story opens, her aunt has just died, and Ash has just graduated from high school. And she's kind of at a loss of what to do. She always assumed that she would be in college running in the fall for, you know, some great Division I program, and she finds that no one's recruited her. She's been accepted to 3 different colleges, and it's not any place she could see herself being. There are places that her aunt really, encouraged her to apply to. And she's just kind of at a loss of, what am I going to do? And the novel opens on the day in June, right after she graduates from high school, that her best friend from high school, who graduated a year ahead of her, he shows up on her doorstep. And he graduated the year before and joined the Navy and went off. And she hasn't seen him since. He wasn't able to get leave to come to her aunt's funeral. And he shows up. And he's just basically like, okay, I'm here to rescue you. I said I was going to rescue you. And the trajectory of the story is that he invites her to move to New York City with him. And she ends up going with him. And she thinks of this year after high school as the year that she's going to figure out what to do with her life. And so it follows her through that. It's another year in the life story. A similar, I think, age group for Beautiful Game. Similar issues, but different issues. Ash is basically an orphan in the world because her parents were killed in a plane crash when she was young. And it has a lot of, she was in the crash too and she survived. And it has a lot of survivor's guilt issues. I always come back to illness. It seems like that's kind of a very common theme in my stories. If anyone has read the other stories, they'll know that cancer makes a big appearance, and that's partly because when I was 7, my godmother died of cancer, and it was one of those life-changing things. She was my parents' best friend, and my babysitter, and had first person to hold me after I was born. And I think that's one of the reasons I keep coming back to it, is that she died, and then when I was 15, my mom was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease that would kill her in 10 years, maybe 15 if we were lucky. So I was looking at my mom would die before I was 30. Fortunately, she was misdiagnosed and she's still alive. She has fibromyalgia, which is something you can live with for, a very, very, very long time. It's not a terminal disease. But I lived from 15 to 28 thinking that my mom would be dead by the time I was 30. So those are the kinds of issues that I explore and return to again and again in my writing, are these ideas of loss, and especially of like a parental figure, an authority figure, and what happens after that moment of loss, and what happens, how do you go on with your life, how are you able to be happy and build a life when at a young age you realize that anything can happen at any moment. You can lose the person you love at any moment, which it's really interesting because my wife didn't really lose anyone. She lost her grandfather, but that was kind of to be expected, at that time. And we had these totally different experiences growing up. And I think that's one of the things that attracts us to each other, is we have really different perspectives. And she is also just genuinely an optimistic person and always assumes that everything's going to go right. And I am this, anything that could go wrong probably will, and I worry about it. And what's great is that I think we bring balance to each other in a lot of ways. And for me, writing is a way that I can kind of explore that what-if moment, that what if the worst happens? How do you go on? And kind of convince myself that it's okay. Like, loss is part of life, even though Americans aren't great at dealing with it or talking about it or acknowledging it in our everyday life. But through my writing, I get to show myself that there's love after loss. There's rebuilding after loss. There's the joy of parenting after loss, in the face of loss. And I think that for me, that's the big theme that runs through most of my novels, including Flight, which I'm probably a couple months away from releasing at this point. But that's a big theme for her. It's how to rebuild her life. And of course she falls in love, because I do like a good love story.
Yeah. But I can relate to you, because when I was 8, my grandmother died, and I lived in the same house with her, and she was really my mother figure. Even though my mom was a stay-at-home mom, I bonded with her more closely, and I find that I see the world a lot differently too. And I
you know, if I have a contentious relationship with somebody in the family, I try my best to still communicate with them because, you know, once they're gone, and there's nothing that you can do about that. And so I'm cautious, and I have human behavior that, you know, somebody who would not experience that kind of loss would not be behaving in that particular way. And so when you were mentioning it, and I was like, I see it not necessarily in my writing, but I definitely see that in my, you know, not just cynicism, because I grew up in an urban area, and I am urban. Like, you don't love urban, I love urban, and I feel bizarre in non-urban relationship situations. But like I said, you know, you get that particular perspective that unless you've dealt with loss, you don't get it. But at the same time, like, I can't watch TV shows or commercials or what that doesn't have, if they have a terminal character, I'm going to bawl because, like, I have that.
I know. Totally. I used to, when I was in my early 20s and I was living in Seattle and I worked at a software company, I remember, and I still thought then that my mom only had a few more years left, and I felt so guilty for moving far away, and yet she encouraged me, go on, have your life, you know, do what you want to do, but I felt so guilty for it, and I would sit in meetings, and meetings are just dull in the workplace, and sometimes I would space out, and the thing that would come to me was, my mom's going to be dead in like 10 years, and it was just so, I don't know, it was so self-indulgent in a way, and yet it was this thing that I couldn't escape. And it was a different way of seeing the world. And, I don't know. You know what I mean about just seeing the world in a different way.
One of the last things that I want to touch on is that you self-publish as well as work with a publisher. So if you could just, because I'd like to, we have to say goodbye soon. Unfortunately, the interview's only going to be about an hour long, so I want to make sure that we kind of get a little in on that. Can you explain how you found yourself self-publishing?
Yeah. So Family Jewels was rejected because it didn't have, it's not a romance, and it's, sorry, I'm waving at my wife, she's about to come in. Not a romance, didn't have a really defined target audience. And so Bella wasn't comfortable publishing it, and I tried a couple other Lesbian publishers, and they were like, gosh, there's just no really defined market for it. And so I thought, well, this is my chance to be the total geek that I am and, you know, hand code some. I'd always been interested in EPUB technology, and I was like, I can hand code because I do websites and other technological things in my daily life and Photoshop. And I thought, oh, I can make a cover. That'd be so cool. And then I geeked out and decided to self-publish Family Jewels. And I decided to do Gay Pride and Prejudice first as like a trial run to see what it would be like, because Gay Pride and Prejudice is almost all Jane Austen's words with my tweaks and embellishments to it. I wanted to read Gay Pride and Prejudice, so I wrote it because I love Pride and Prejudice, but I always thought, you know, I don't fully identify with these characters because they're all straight. Although, you know, at least a couple of them seem like maybe they're not straight. So I decided to flesh out the subtext and go for it. And that was my kind of guinea pig to see, can I self-publish? Can I do everything from start to finish? And it was overwhelming in terms of the time required and the energy and the different things that you do. But I loved it at the same time. I really enjoyed the process and the creative control that it allowed me. And I have an editing background, I have a tech background, I have a graphic design background, so I felt kind of fortunate that I could try to do all those things and feel fairly confident in my ability to do it. And I loved it. It was great. And then Family Jewels was another one that it wasn't going to find an audience, apparently, with a publisher, so great. You know, it wouldn't be published if I didn't self-publish it.
Well, it's important to have that kind of writing out there that doesn't fit the current publishing paradigm.
Yeah, the conventions, the genres, and it didn't. It definitely didn't fit anywhere. So, and it was a story I really wanted to do. It has a lot of me in it again. I'm Dutch and Scotch American, so those are my two main backgrounds, and I grew up in Southwest Michigan, which is just full of Dutch people, and I really wanted to kind of tell that story of the sense I have of being an American descendant of the Dutch, and how different American Dutch people are from actual Dutch people. It was one of the messages I tried to convey in the story, which is that the Netherlands people are pretty chill and pretty cool. And the Dutch people I grew up with, both in Michigan and then when I moved to Western Washington, there's a large Dutch contingent too. It's all this very conservative, anti-gay Dutch Reformed crowd, which is funny when you think of the Netherlands and you think of kind of the very laid-back politics that you find there, in particular when it comes to personal freedom. And all the Dutch Americans I know are so conservative. And again, I'm generalizing, but I'm basing it on personal experience. But
that's not altogether that uncommon.
Mm-hmm. That you can have a very conservative group here, even though back in the Netherlands they are not.
Yeah, kind of like puritanical New England. No offense, New England, but...
No, but it's very accurate. And one of the little ironies is... They left, a lot of folks left Europe because they were being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. And then they come to a new place, and then it's their turn to persecute everybody around them that doesn't believe what they believe.
Yeah, which is, you still see that in kind of political battles between minority groups in the U.S. And, gay people and different groups have gotten into it, and that's unfortunate because... we're not each other's enemies.
No. Can't we all just get along?
Can't we all just get along?
So this has been a very fun interview. I can go on talking forever because sisterhood stuff is so much fun talking about.
Exactly. I'm with you on that.
So we could keep on going, but we must not. We have to remember my target audience is only going to sit for an hour. We can't go forever.
Yeah, my daughter's going to be home any moment, and my pregnant wife, so.
I know you're going to have twins soon.
In 2.5 weeks, I think. So I'll be lucky to get flight done and out soon.
You better do it now, because once you have,
Well, actually, I'm going to be home for a month from work, and that'll give me, I have decided, I'm going to set aside some time. And I was able to do that right after Alex was born as well. So, of course, I didn't have a 2-year-old then and twins, but we'll see.
So thank you for coming on the show. I'll definitely invite you again. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great time talking about rugby and women's colleges and all of that.
Absolutely.